Why is everybody wrong about Russia? Let's talk about that right now on the Hot Zone. So, would you rather do the right thing for the wrong reasons or the wrong thing for the right reasons? If you had to pick one of those two, I would personally rather do the right thing, even if it was for the wrong reasons, because the right thing is the right thing after all. And when it comes to our geopolitical strategy towards Russia, I think that it seems like everybody has done the wrong thing, or at least the right thing for the wrong reasons. Let me explain. First of all, I think that typically Republicans have been much stronger on foreign policy. Republican presidents have been much better at it. They're not as whiny and spineless and flaccid and everything as, apologizing for America like Obama did. Back during the 2012 presidential debates, Obama and Mitt Romney, who is a first-class dork by himself, should have never been in a presidential campaign against Barack Obama. But at least he had the foresight and understanding of geopolitics to realize that Russia and Iran and China were large geopolitical threats to us. Barack Obama, on the other hand, mocked Mitt Romney for saying so.
Governor Romney, I'm glad that you recognize that al-Qaeda is a threat, because a few months ago, when you were asked what's the biggest geopolitical threat facing America, you said Russia. Not al-Qaeda, you said Russia. In the 1980s are now calling to ask for their foreign policy back, because the Cold War has been over for 20 years.
And then he went on to cozy up to Russia and tell them that he could give them a lot more flexibility once he got reelected. And indeed, when in 2014, Russia invaded Ukraine, the first time, well, what did Barack Obama do? Exactly nothing, as they took over large parts of the eastern part of the Donbass and Crimea. Well, that foreign policy sort of, passivity led to where we are today with the situation between Russia and the United States. Now, the strange thing today is that the Republicans are on the completely wrong side of this debate now because they're falling prey to this sort of nationalist, very inward-looking idea that, well, we've got problems here at home. We've got open borders, and we've got homeless, and we've got all these problems here at home. So why do we even care what happens between Russia and Ukraine? And that's a very short-sighted policy. Two things can be true at the same time. We can have problems in the United States that need addressing, and we can still address problems outside the United States, because, believe it or not, the whole reason that you have geopolitics is because that countries engage in foreign policy is because if you don't, the consequences are very often worse than if you do. And so the United States has rarely done it right. As many people outside the U.S. have told me, the United States usually does the right thing eventually after they've exhausted all their other options. In this case, what we're seeing is that Republicans are either being very isolationist in their thinking, which is always a bad idea, because if the U.S. pulls out of foreign policy, we leave a vacuum that our adversaries will step into. So Russia, China, Iran, al-Qaeda, whoever it is, they're going to step into the holes that we leave if we disengage from the world around us. So when it comes to what to do about Ukraine, you've got Republicans that are, it's so frustrating to hear people who ought to know better. I mean, it's one thing to hear, just regular Joes on the street talking about Nazis in Ukraine, because I heard Tucker Carlson say there were. well, they're just listening and repeating the talking points that are being, spouted by other people who have not been to Ukraine, who don't know a thing about it. I've spent the last 6 months in Ukraine. I'll very quickly go through these points. There are no Nazis in Ukraine to speak of. There are more Nazis in the United States and in Russia than there are in Ukraine. There are no bioweapons labs in Ukraine. It would be absolute idiocy to build bioweapons labs, weapons creating labs in places that are developing countries that are right next door to our biggest adversaries. That's a really stupid idea. COVID notwithstanding, we would not do that. There were labs that we were supporting in Ukraine that were a helpful, good thing to help us identify bioweapons before they got to the United States. That's a good thing, okay? So that's absolute half-truth perverted into absolute ridiculous idiocy. The third thing is, well, Ukraine's corrupt. Okay, the United States is not corrupt. Russia's not corrupt. Are you kidding me? Maybe they are corrupt, and they have been corrupt. The current government was literally elected to reduce the corruption, to get rid of the corruption. And they had been doing a pretty good job of that for the most part. That corruption came because of the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union fell, it left this gigantic vacuum of power, and it was like the Wild West. Everybody, that could jumped in to get their piece of the pie, and corruption was endemic. But it has been getting better under this new government. Oh, well, they're a bunch of globalists supported by George Soros. I haven't seen any evidence of that since in the 6 months I've been there. I've met with the president. I've met with his cabinet. I've met with his advisors. I've met with his military leaders. I've met with lots and lots and lots of regular people. And you know what Ukrainians are all about? They're all about Ukraine. They like Ukraine. They want to be Ukraine. They want to be Ukrainian. They want to speak Ukrainian. And they want to not be under the thumb of Russia. And so they're embracing the West, not because the West is globalist, but because the West isn't Russia. That's what they're doing. That's what they care about. They want the things about the West that it's been traditionally known for, which is freedom, liberty, self-determination, things like that. That's not really known for that much anymore. The Ukrainians, I would argue, are a little bit behind the times, just like the migrants who are, flooding into the United States because they want the freedom that the United States has always offered, with no idea that they're going to be subject to 50% tax on their wages and stuff, not just from the federal, but state and local tax, all that. Anyway, bottom line is, Ukraine is not, by and large, a globalist country any more than El Salvador is a globalist country or someplace like that. They just want to be able to live their lives and be Ukrainian. They care about Ukraine. Now, so why do Republicans, who typically would be all for doing something to knock our adversaries down a peg and to project U.S. power around the globe, are now going, we shouldn't have anything to do with that? And the only people who are saying that we should have something to do with helping out in Ukraine are the people who want to spend gazillions of our tax dollars doing it, which doesn't need to happen. We could help Ukraine without spending dozens and dozens of billions of dollars on Ukraine of the people's treasure. We could do that. There are lots and lots. We could support lots of policies and programs that would have helped Ukraine and would have probably avoided the war to begin with. But instead, we've got these idiot actual globalists in power who are pushing to help Ukraine for their own agenda, which is, again, doing the right thing, I'd say, for the wrong reasons. Now, we see the exact same thing going on in Armenia right now. Armenia is this tiny little Christian country in Central Asia. It's surrounded by our adversaries. It's surrounded by Turkey. If you thought Turkey was a NATO ally, you haven't been paying attention. They haven't been an ally for a long time. Iran, which of course has always been an enemy, and Russia, which is an adversary, cum enemy. And so All of those bigger countries around it have designs on that little territory of Armenia because they have to. So Russia wants to trade with Iran. The only way for them to do that directly is to go through Armenia. Azerbaijan wants to get their oil to the west. The only way to do that is to go across Armenia into Turkey. Turkey wants to create this pan-Turkic alliance, and the only way to do that is to take over this Christian nation right next to them and reinstitute their pogroms and their the Ottoman genocide of the Armenian people, which they've literally talked about doing. So you would think that if smart Republicans in the United States Senate and Congress would look at that and would say, hey, let's support Armenia. Let's stand up and support Armenia, which would basically put a plug in between Russia, Turkey, Iran, and Azerbaijan. That would not be a bad thing. That would thwart 3 of our 4 biggest adversaries and enemies right there, just by supporting that tiny country of Armenia. And oh, by the way, they've got 2 million people, Armenian Americans, living in the United States, mostly in California, and they vote based on who helps Armenia the most. So if Republicans stood up for Armenia, if Donald Trump had stood up for Armenia during the last war in 2020, well, guess what? Maybe the outcome of the election would have been different, or at least he would have got another 1 million or so votes from Armenians who would have loved anybody to have stood up and just said, we support Armenia. Armenia is a Christian nation. Armenia is in a really bad place right now. A lot of Republicans now are saying, hey, let Armenia get crushed. We don't care. They're a vassal state of Russia. We don't like Russia, therefore we don't like Armenia because Armenia is a vassal state of Russia. But Armenia doesn't like Russia either. The only reason Armenia is connected to Russia right now is because they need Russia as a big brother. They need Russia as a big brother. So who are the only people that are helping Armenia? Democrats from California mostly, because they have constituents who are Armenian. And it's so frustrating to see, of all people, God help us, Nancy Pelosi going to Armenia and being the only representative from the United States to do so and stand up for Armenians. Nancy Pelosi, the worst U.S. politician in the world, maybe in U.S. history. I mean, horrific. Why? Why is she the only one standing up for Armenia? Why aren't some Republicans saying, wait a minute, there might be some longer term benefit for us to stand up for Armenia right now? I'm not saying we got to send them tens of billions of dollars, but you know what? Dadgummit, if we're going to stand up on a moral basis for Ukraine and say it's wrong for countries to invade their neighbors, and so Ukraine, we need to support Ukraine however we can, because they're being invaded by Russia, well, then we should be supporting Armenia because they're being invaded by Azerbaijan. And who cares if Azerbaijan has some oil that the West might need? The West is going to have to get rid of all that oil. I mean, that's exactly what they wanted, right? Right? Western Europe wanted to get rid of all these globalists, all these moronic environmentalist worshipers. They wanted to get rid of the petroleum industry, right? So why are we allowing them to let Armenia be crushed in order for Azerbaijan to get a pipeline over to Europe, so Europe doesn't have to turn down the thermostat this winter? It's inconsistent, it's hypocritical, and it's morally wrong for us not to stand up for Armenia right now. And from a long-term perspective, when it comes to foreign policy, it's just plain dumb. So I would say, write your congressman, write your senator, whatever you think you ought to do, and encourage them to stand up for Armenia. But not only that, pray for the people of Armenia, because really the only thing that's going to fix any of these problems between Azerbaijan and Armenia, between Turkey and Armenia, between Turkey and Russia, between Iran and Azerbaijan, or between Russia and Ukraine, the only thing that's going to fix any of that is a change of people's hearts, is Jesus. And the reason that I stand up for Ukraine, that I go to Ukraine and do this reporting, the reason I go to Armenia and do this reporting is not because of my political stance on any of that. It's because that's where the people are hurting. And I do this job as a war correspondent because I want to tell the stories of the people who are hurting the most in the world, so that other people can give and help and go and pray and do things about it to help them. We should be trying to make this world a better place. And that's what I'm trying to do by my reporting. So I hope you'll support me. Go to chuckholton.locals.com and you can subscribe there and get some subscriber-only content I've been putting up lately. It's good stuff. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Like us and subscribe. We'll see you.